Thank you all for joining us today in this session. And our webinar today is titled ELT Through a Pandemic, a Call for a Change of Mindset. And our guest today is Dr. Rabia Hos. I would like to take the opportunity to welcome and thank Rabia first for presenting this webinar for us. I have known Rabia for a long time. She was my first buddy assigned by my advisor when I started my PhD journey at Warner School of Education at University of Rochester. So I must say that she is a brilliant scholar and a wonderful human being, and extremely supportive and friendly as well. So I will read her official bio first, and then we will get started with the presentation in a bit. So Dr. Rabia Haas is an assistant professor of TESOL and bilingual and dual language education at the University of Rhode Island, USA. She was an ESOL teacher and an administrator in Rochester Public Schools for over a decade before moving into the higher education. After receiving her PhD from the University of Rochester in 2012, she served as an assistant professor in the English language teaching department at a Turkish university and at Illinois State University. Her research focuses on the experiences of newcomer immigrant and refugee students with interrupted formal education, SAIF, and English language teacher professional development. She participated in numerous research projects involving refugees and immigrants, and have published in high impact journals such as Urban Education and Education and Urban Societies. She is the co-editor-in-chief of the European Journal of Educational Research and serves on multiple international, national, and regional professional organizations. Before I welcome Rabia to start her presentation, I would like to request our honorable head of the department, Arifa Rahman, to say a few words in welcoming our guest and launching our event officially.
Thank you, Farzana. I'd like to formally welcome Dr. Rabia Hos, and thank you for joining us this evening to talk to us about ELT through a pandemic and a change of the mindset. So I think that over the last year, we've all gone through this process of adapting and adopting new ways of teaching in our in academia, and lots of things that we had taken for granted. Those things had to be were challenged, and we had to readjust and make all kinds of changes to the way we teach. So I'm really looking forward to your talk, and I hope I can pick up some new ideas and things that we can adopt. I think we can all look forward to that. So I will not speak for too long anymore, and I will pass on the baton to you, Farzana.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farzana, and thank you so much, Dr. Rahman, for your warm welcome. Like I said, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure being here. So I'm going to start my screen sharing. I actually thought about, a topic when Farzana asked me. I thought about it, and I know that many topics have been shared, many webinars have been, had since the pandemic. And I thought perhaps like focusing on the social emotional aspect of the pandemic and how it affected our teaching would be most important, I think, at this point, now that we just passed the 1 year mark of the pandemic since it started. So that's why I thought that we need to perhaps shift our minds into a more open and more growth mindset and change of mindset in teaching practices, rather than, there's a lot out there. Everybody, panicked at first. Many of the teachers, in different countries weighed in on mental approaches. So these are some figures that I actually got from the statistics, that many school closures have affected and schools are still closed in many parts of the world, and the teachers have to shift their teaching to online immediately without any preparation. And we thought that summer would be helpful in preparing better for the new year, but then that didn't happen because everybody was still scrambling. And we all thought at some point, and we still do, I think, we all say to ourselves that this is overwhelming, right? It feels like we're living at work, even working from home. I mean, even before the pandemic, I actually taught online. So my courses were mostly online, but I thought, it wouldn't affect me as much. But now it feels like with meetings and with student meetings and this and that, conferences, it feels like one of our faculty members say that we live at work now, right? As teachers. So it's really overwhelming at times. Uh, and a lot of teachers have really joined the conversation when the pandemic started, spilling out, the concerns and anxieties. What are we going to do? How can I shift to online learning? And then thinking about, people who actually, students who may not have access to internet. That's a big issue, right? In many parts of the world, even in the US, you would think people would have access, but having access to internet is a major problem for many students. And think about students whose parents have to work, go out on work, right? They become the de facto babysitters for their siblings. So how do they juggle, attending school and caring for their siblings? And then, and what if, like, there were also concerns on the part of the teachers? What if school systems decide that online learning is working just fine, and then schools would never reopen, right? There are also concerns about that in many places. The panic is first certainly like understandable, but then there were also many like fantastic, highly creative teachers providing different strategies as the obstacles had appeared. So, but then even in many, there's my cat in the background. In the darkest, times in history, some people rise and cope and more, but then we also build resilience, right? We build creativity and ability to innovate. So the pandemic was a great opportunity for us to begin innovations in our teaching. But then at the highest level, I think that a shift in the mindset is definitely needed. Even the most optimistic educators, right, conceded to the point that there are plenty of strategies and tactics that educators have been sharing widely, but we are often not, we're overseeing the emotional and psychological scaffolds that would be needed to teach in this new paradigm of the pandemic. So uh, at so these are some of the emotional and psychological tactics that actually we should think about as we teach in the pandemic, or maybe beyond the pandemic, because this is going to have long-term effects on many people and our students and us as teachers too. So during a panic moment, right, we need to expect trial and plenty of error, right? It's a given that we need to start being reasonable with ourselves, right? And it's really impossible to shift to distance learning overnight without lots of trial and error. We need to accept that. And we need to plan for it, do our best to make peace with our errors, right? It's okay. We all make mistakes. We don't need to stress about that. And because stress isn't helping any of us at this point in our lives, right? And we need to acknowledge the extraordinary, reset our baseline, right? We're all operating in the shadow of a global pandemic, and it's disorienting and limiting. Business as usual is unrealistic, right? Many schools have expected business as usual. We need to keep our practices, meet standards. In the US, there are teaching standards that teachers have to meet, objectives and this and that. But we need to really step back and think about that business as usual isn't really realistic, right? The real points to consider are not the strict, adherence to the regular conditions, but how to provide a rich experience to all learners who are now without traditional teachers, sitting beside them, standing beside them in the classrooms. In other words, we should give ourselves and the time and permission to figure this out. We still haven't figured it out, right? Many of us, we're still juggling to cope with how do we make it better, right? Teaching is always about not doing it perfectly, right? There is never a perfect teaching or perfect classroom. There's always room for improvement. We know that in real life, but now with the online teaching and shifting to the online teaching, we need to understand that we need to step back and reflect, and then perhaps try to do better the next day or the next time. Reducing the workload for ourselves and for our students. I know it's easy to say than done, right? But if our schools allow it, we should plan to do less, right? Students are not as productive, and we're not as productive. I mean, I feel like I'm doing a lot. I'm always busy all the time, right? Because I have meetings back to back. I have this and that. I have meeting with students, and I have to prepare my, classes, and then I have to do grading. I feel like I'm working 24/7, but then I don't see myself as being as productive as I used to. So we have more time, more busy work, but then we're not as productive. Similar with students, I think, right? We have that we have a lot of that emotional baggage that we're carrying with us. And also we have to consider, right, for working parents, we're also trying to work from home, and then there are siblings, there are kids running around in the background, and there's limited Wi-Fi in many places. uh, for teachers, I actually recommended trying like using Google quizzes, some forms like reading logs, and some short live sessions rather than keeping students for 2 hours, right, on the live session. So what would normally take us one period to teach in the classroom will probably take twice as long now with the online teaching. And we have to understand that no person is an island, right? We are social animals working from home, and worse, from a quarantine in isolating, often like depressing for both teachers and students. We have to, make an effort to reach out to our colleagues and trusted professionals to provide emotional and psychological context to our work. And then teaching at the moment is extraordinarily hard. So we'll need to have the virtual company of people who are experiencing what we're experiencing at the moment. And don't forget to reach out to students as often as we can. Facilitating peer-to-peer communication is also critical in this. And then perhaps like in a language classroom, assigning pen pals so that students with no internet can feel like they belong, it would be critical. Um, Everyone thinks they can't before they can, right? Some degree of pessimism and self-doubt comes with the territory, right? We know how to teach, and we'll figure this out in time. We need to take it day by day, and it would get less overwhelming and more routine, right, as we do it more and more. We need to try to remain calm, though we'll have a few moments where that goes out the window, and we need to keep plugging away. Being open-minded and flexible is the key, right? Not really restricting ourselves to the old normal, but the new normal. Um, Everyone thinks you can until you pause, talk it out, and with folks who are doing it, and then know that you'll get through it, right? As we speak to each other more and more, we know that everybody is trying their best, right? We're all struggling through this, but then it will eventually get through this, the difficult times. And mind the gap. We'll work hard, but there are students facing more severe challenges, right? Many, like especially in the U.S., I can speak to my observations here. Many communities or poor communities, communities stricken with poverty are struggling, right? There's more COVID cases, and kids are, babysitting their siblings with working parents who have to go out to work to survive and making the ends meet. So there are a lot more challenges than we face, perhaps, as educators. Students with no internet or no computer will need support, as those, with learning differences or other circumstances, students who are differently abled, right? Linguistic minority students. So all these circumstances make distance learning especially difficult for many students. Equity is a huge issue. It was an issue before the pandemic. Now pandemic has doubled equity issues, right, in education. Assessment is an issue, right? But we have to think about this, right? Teachers are doing their best, students are doing their best, and then they're giving us the strength to go on, right? We have to keep going, keep chugging away. Um, Perhaps those who have lack of internet access, we have to have different solutions for them, right? maybe old analog approaches of paper and pencil tasks, workbooks, and activity packets. And I know that teachers have been doing that, right? Dropping off packets of work to be done at students' homes, updating parents and students via phone calls daily, perhaps, right? This is more work for teachers, but then certainly needed in some communities where internet access is an issue. And we also have to look at the bright side, right? I'm in Bangladesh now, collaborating with you. This may not have been possible, perhaps, right before the pandemic. Maybe we didn't think about it, right? We always thought about, in person. But now we know that it's possible. So the pandemic has created opportunities for new approaches and growth. So there are collaborative partnerships across the globe, right? There are millions of resources, right, that's shared locally, globally, nationally, and it's right at the tip of our fingers when we have internet access. Lots of open educational resources that's available, like, to everyone, to all educators, right? Virtual exchange between teachers and students around the world. This makes it possible, right? In the, maybe we had e-pals or maybe pen pals in the past, but now it's possible through virtual Zoom meetings, right? We can make it possible for our classes. Webinars and PD opportunities available freely. And then we also have to think about, like, teaching and learning are embodied, right? There are social activities. Classrooms, right, even in postgraduate seminar rooms, are complex, unpredictable, and exciting places, because there are places where lots of interactions are happening at the same time, simultaneously, right? The lockdown and the pandemic has brought home to us properly complicated, like, social understanding of what schools are for. I've been actually questioning myself. What is school for? I've been seeing my kindergartner, 6-year-old, going to school, and then she did distance learning for some time. And I found myself questioning, what is school for, really? What are they for? Is, far more than transmission of knowledge. School is for more than, knowledge, inserting knowledge into kids' heads, but it's more than that, right? There is the social aspect, emotional aspect. But if the pandemic has provided us an opportunity to reflect on what is most valuable, right, in school, in teaching, it has also allowed us to the opportunity to develop a different vision of schooling, perhaps, for our students, right? This is so from this moment on, I'm gonna switch gears into perhaps the aspect of social emotional learning. So what are your hopes and dreams for your community of learners? So this is a question that I'd like to pose to the audience here. What are your hopes and dreams for your community of learners?
That they would interact.
Interact, yes. Interaction is a key, right? Socialization. Yes, great.
I think, giving them the opportunity to take more active part in their learning process, and not just, depending on the teacher. So becoming, meeting the teacher halfway. That would be my dream, dream student.
More autonomy on the part of the learners,
Exactly.
Empowering learners to be more autonomous. Certainly, yes, that's important. Any others who'd like to chime in? All right, I'll go in. So social emotional learning. What is social emotional learning? I'm sure you've all, heard of it, learned about it, read about it, right? And especially during the pandemic, it has become very popular, right? What comes to mind when you hear the word social emotional learning? What is social emotional learning? Anybody? Thoughts?
There's a comment in the chat box, helping enrich their day-to-day lives.
Yes, allowing students to enrich their day-to-day lives. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. Okay, great. Okay, so this is a formal definition of social emotional learning. So social emotional learning provides the structure and process for adults and students to develop fundamental emotional and social competencies, experiences to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions, right? Social emotional learning, SEL, builds and deepens a positive school climate, right? We always had this. We always had social emotional learning or emphasis on social emotional learning even before the pandemic. But now with the pandemic, we have increased our concentration on the importance of social emotional learning, how it's critical in creating that positive learning environment, right? When we create the positive atmosphere in our classrooms, then it's possible for students to learn more, right? So there are core competencies in SEL: self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, and social awareness. Those are and relationship skills. So these are the 5 different competencies that are part of the SEL, social emotional learning. Student learning experience is at the core, right? Then comes the family and community, instruction and curriculum, and safe and supportive climates. So these all lead to students' learning experiences once we create these learning experiences in the classroom. It's a given, supported by research, that social emotional learning promotes success in school and life, right? The inputs and approaches might be self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making, safe, caring, positive learning climate and instructional strategies, right? Well-managed, engaging, cooperative, supportive, and high expectations. Having high expectations for students leads to, the short-term outcomes are greater attachment and engagement and commitment to school, and less risky behavior and more positive development. Discipline has become a huge issue in many schools. I think globally that we have that issue, right? In K-12 especially. So once we have SEL, social emotional learning needs met, then hopefully this will lead to less discipline issues. And then eventually in the long term, it will be greater success in school, work, and life for adults later on. So this is a short video on SEL. I'm not sure if you can hear. Can you hear?
Challenging,
Yes.
unprecedented, uncertain. These words all describe what we're experiencing right now as students, educators, and families are faced with navigating a new normal. But as we plan for the school year ahead, one thing is clear: the intrinsic value of social emotional learning, or SEL. Here's why. 1. SEL can foster a sense of safety and be used with trauma-sensitive practices. Students can't focus on learning if they don't feel safe and supported. The COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis around systemic racism have created traumatic experiences for many families. These experiences contribute to fear, anger, and anxiety, and increase the risk of toxic stress. As part of a trauma-sensitive approach, SEL can help students manage their emotions in a safe and supportive way and set them up for learning success. 2. SEL helps build positive connections and relationships. This upcoming school year involves a lot of uncertainty, and site closures have made it difficult to maintain the strong relationships that previously developed between students, teachers, and families. This fall, whether you're planning for in-person or remote teaching, using SEL to build trusting connections within your learning community can help lay the necessary foundation for academic learning. 3. SEL helps address the learning inequality caused by school closures. Remote learning is inherently challenging and not always appropriate developmentally. Students who are already struggling socially or academically are often the ones who face more severe challenges with remote learning. SEL can play a key role in helping students build the skills they need for effective learning, from self-regulation to problem solving, especially in an out-of-school setting. 4. SEL provides support to teachers and staff. It's more important than ever to care for educators' well-being. By helping teachers and staff manage stress, build trust with students and colleagues, and stay engaged at work, SEL can strengthen the whole school community. Now is the time to bring SEL front and center. But don't just take our word for it. In a recent survey by TESOL with responses from 37 states, 84% reported that SEL has increased in importance as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And 78% of states reported that district-based SEL requests have increased since the beginning of the pandemic. We often talk about SEL in terms of improving behavior or its academic benefits. But SEL also builds skills that help bring us together in times of crisis and in everyday life. And in this uniquely challenging moment, SEL is a critical tool in both addressing the immediate needs of students, families, and staff, and helping them succeed in the new school year.
So this leads me to, right, what do we do as educators? I know, I'm not sure who's in the audience. Farzana, perhaps you help me out. Are they teacher candidates, teachers, practicing teachers, students?
All types of students
All
and
types.
teachers, and yeah,
Yeah, we have,
students,
we have,
teachers,
yes.
yeah, practicing teachers, and actually, I think also aspiring teachers.
Great, great. So self-care, right? We all talk about safe self-care, and sometimes I ask myself, it's easier to say than done, right? How do we integrate self-care, and why should we integrate it, right? If you don't have, self-care, that will lead to burnout. A lot of teacher retention, especially there's now a big issue in the US retaining teachers. Some schools actually had to close because they couldn't find substitute teachers. So this is big, right? Teacher burnout. Also, that would affect student outcomes, right? And teacher-student relationships, self-care. And then the shifts to distance learning and other pandemic stressors have actually made it necessary for us to engage in self-care. We put students at the center of learning, so why should we make educators' self-care a priority, right? So self-care begins with encouraging openness, flexibility, and adaptability, and humor, right? Be flexible and ready to adapt to unexpected events, like I said previously, right? Take physical and mental breaks. Walking has helped me a lot, I think, during the pandemic. So whenever I feel exhausted, I take a short walk. Find opportunities for laughter and finding humor. Sometimes you just have to open up the TV and watch the empty screen, right? Thinking about nothing. That helps, I think. That helps me, certainly. Maybe 30 minutes of TV would be helpful. Mind body activities, right? Mindfulness, jogging, yoga, exercise, listening. Look at me preaching. I'm trying to keep up with all these too myself, struggling to keep up with, exercise, listening or dancing to music, walking outdoors. Certainly all the things that would help us to stay sane during this time. So what is this, have to do with language teaching? So why is social emotional learning important to language teaching? Those of us who are teaching English, right? Many of you are teaching English or teaching foreign languages. So why is this critical in teaching languages? What does self-care and social emotional learning have to do with teaching languages? Anybody?
Well, practice of teaching languages, what do we really want to say with language, how we're feeling? We want to communicate our inner experiences and emotions first and foremost. Yes, there's also the component to describing our world, but I mean, our own observations and how we're feeling inside weighs heavily on how we see the world as well. So if we don't connect language with emotions, it's a hit and miss situation, I feel.
And motivation, right? Language has a lot to do with motivation. How do we motivate students to stay engaged and to want to continue learning languages, right? What's the
Distance learning? It's inherently difficult to motivate learners to learn anything.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So why should I learn, foreign languages? Is many students ask. Say hi. Hi, Katie. Say hi. Hi. This is Luna, our cat. She's helped us through the pandemic. We adopted her at the beginning of the pandemic, and now she's all over the place.
She's a beautiful feline.
Thank you. Why else is it important? Farzana, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think, that connection is very important. And also because, we need to show our students that we really care for them. And, for any learning, it's important. And for language learning, probably it's even more important.
Absolutely. So when we are, socially and emotionally well, then that will also transfer to our students, right? That would be reflected on our teaching. That would be reflected, in our day-to-day interaction with students. When we're feeling down, we certainly would reflect that in our teaching, right? Even though we may not want to. So it's critical that we first take care of ourselves, right? Self-care, and then use perhaps tips from social emotional learning. There's tons of resources available on SEL. On if you do a Google search, I mean, there's tons of videos and activities and worksheets and resources that you can actually use with your students to establish those norms in the classroom. And this should be done like throughout the year, not only at the beginning, but throughout the year. Perhaps a quick check-in with students, right? Emotional checking, how they're doing, right? Asking them, uh, various ideas, or checking on just, I mean, personally, right? Checking on to make sure that your students are doing well is a good gesture, right? At this point in the pandemic. Also, it actually allows you to build those relationships with your students. So even in my asynchronous online classes, I actually do a weekly Google form. I use a Google form to ask how students are doing, if there are any issues, and then at the end, I ask them, do you need to meet with me one-on-one? Do you need any help? Please leave your email, please leave your phone number so I could, really connect with you. That makes a huge difference in creating those opportunities for students to really reach out to you when in need.
I absolutely agree with you, Rabia. So I currently, I know that a lot of my students actually in different sections that I'm teaching are having issues, family members suffering from COVID, they themselves, so some of them are. So when I send a note to them that I hope you recover completely soon, let me know if you need any kind of help. So, the kind of response I get from them, uh, that, they really appreciate it. And that's something they wanted to hear at that moment. So it's really useful. I know that there was one student in my class today who was crying actually, because she's scared, her family members all are COVID positive now. And all I could do is just listen to her and tell her that don't worry about like classes and assignments for the time being. We will think about those later, and just focus on your health for the time being. So it's very important in moments like this, and for any online teaching situation, this is something probably we should always keep in mind, not only during pandemic.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. And understanding that we are human first, right? We could teach grammar, we could teach this, we could teach, communication activities, we could teach the language, but then first, really, students need to see us as caring individuals, caring teachers, right? Ethics of care, which I adopt in many of my research and in my teaching. I think caring for students as human beings is the first and foremost important thing that we really need to keep in mind. And then teaching skills and language would follow after. Once we establish those connections with our students, I think they'll ace the learning.
Yes, we need to create the sense of belonging. That's one of the things that the students always struggle with in an online class. So that's why probably SEL is even more important, to build that connection and the sense of belonging, and also to inspire them to interact, ask questions, communicate with each other and with the teacher as well.
Absolutely.
And I think, turning on the video can help with that. When they see you smiling or when they see your facial expressions, I think that also kind of encourages that kind of, camaraderie between the teacher and the students, and they can build a community better. So I
Certainly.
think that's another thing. I mean, we are all hiding behind, we turn off our videos, and students do the same thing. And we can't really, over here especially, we can't really enforce that. we can't really ask them to turn on their videos and have it on all the time because of internet issues. A lot of them are using mobile data and stuff like that. So it costs them to turn on the videos. So, but I think if the teacher does that, at least to some extent, that can, I think, help.
Definitely, certainly, yeah. So it's all about like relationships, right? Just like anything else, we are social human beings, right? Social animals. We really need to start with the relationship building and then teaching more.
Right. I just think of it like, if I were talking to someone and I was standing behind a door and they could only hear my voice,
Yeah,
would I do that in real life? I wouldn't.
right.
I would, stand in front of someone and talk to them directly. So meet them eye to eye and stuff like that. But at this point, that's this is the only other way to sort of overcome that barrier.
Yes, true.
So thank you very much, Rabia. So your presentation, I think, was really useful for us, and it was amazing, and it was timely as well. I think we would take a few more questions if the audience, anyone in the audience, would like to ask any questions to Rabia, or if you have any comments. So
Yes, please chime in.
yeah, you can ask the question, by unmuting yourself, or you can write in the chat box as well. Anybody, if you have any additional questions or comments, any challenges that you are facing and how you are overcoming those challenges that might help others as well.
So definitely, one challenge would be to get the students to sort of feel confident enough to speak up. At the end of my lesson, I would ask, are there any comments? Did you hate the text? Did you like the text? I try to make them welcome to say anything that they want, but I feel like the conventional education has failed us so much. It has boxed these students up. It has taught them to sit and be quiet and listen and be just passive learners. And now we're so suffering because we can't get them to speak up. So I'd like your advice in this.
Truly, yes, I agree. I mean, traditional education has actually failed us, I think. And we knew this, right, for many years. We've all tried to adopt. I mean, no, having been a teacher in Turkey and in the US, I've actually seen the huge difference between having like group activities, allowing students to speak up and not becoming passive. It's all, I mean, in Turkey, I've seen that, there's a shift towards grammar teaching to more communicative language teaching. And now we're encouraging students to speak up more and participate, have more group activities. But then traditionally, they're so used to sitting down and filling out worksheets. It's difficult to make that shift. Even as teachers, right? It's difficult for us. So,
Any more questions or comments?
first, I guess as teachers, we need to have that growth mindset in ourselves to shift our teaching practices to more non-traditional, more interactive style. Because in the teacher literature, there's, you learn all these strategies, all these communicative strategies, interactive strategies in your education, but then it's so easy to fall back into the traditional ways of teaching as a teacher because it's easier, right? You just give them the worksheet and they complete it. So I guess first it starts within us. We need to be able to challenge ourselves, to step out of that box or our comfort zone so that we could really start practicing what we preach or what has
Yes. What kind of SEL strategies can help me with this?
So SEL is actually used oftentimes at the beginning of lessons, right? To check in with students, even in the synchronous and asynchronous things, you could integrate lots of strategies. If you look up SEL, there are tons of resources on how you could bring in social emotional learning into your teaching, daily teaching. So checking in with students at the beginning, and then at the end, wrapping up with, how we're gonna use what we started with. So having a structure, right? A lesson structure, beginning with a routine, and then ending with a routine. Having those routines and consistent routines on a daily basis would actually allow students to feel that comfort within the classroom, so that they would really speak up and they would feel comfortable speaking up. They would feel comfortable making a mistake, right? It should be
Right.
okay. I remember learning English in middle school, and I was so scared because my teacher was like, "Listen to me," screaming at my ears. And then I would, pick the question that it was going to be my turn, because we took turns reading the questions. And I was so scared that I would count, okay, I'm going to do question 25. So let me practice so she doesn't scream at me. So really feeling, allowing students to feel comfortable, not being scared, but comfortable making mistakes, I think is the key.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I see our raised hand, Dr. Hasib Irfanullah.
Hi, thank you, Farzana. Thank you, Rabia, for fantastic presentation. I'm not teaching English as a language. I'm basically a biologist, but I like the topic. That's why I joined in.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you.
I was just wondering, when you talk about mindset change, you are talking about mindset change for the teachers as well as, of course, of the students, because it's both ways. But
Absolutely.
it is not only teachers and students, because we are part of a whole system, education system.
Yes.
What would be your advice, uh, uh, changing the mindset of our policymakers or even the management of our institution,
Yes.
so that they can also embrace something like ACL as well?
Yes.
Would you
Parents
like
as
to
well,
share?
actually.
Yeah.
Parents as well, I think.
Yes, yes. So it's a systemic thing. These have been ingrained. So similar issues are all over the world, right? We have issues with growth mindsets, really staying away from the traditional approaches of teaching and moving away from them and becoming more humanistic and integrating more social and emotional learning, because nowadays everybody has access to knowledge is everywhere at the tip of their fingers, right? It's easy to have access, but then the real thing is making those connections. So I guess this requires a lot of like systemic discussion in our maybe communities of schools, bringing this up to administration as would be a critical thing to do. So really having the buy-in from the administrators that this is a must, that we should integrate into our teaching practices. But then it's not easy. It's easier to say than done. Many schools have integrated SEL in the US. I've seen many schools, but then it's easy for educators to fall back to old approaches or the traditional approaches. So it's slowly, I think it's a slow process. Change in education is very slow and it's very frustrating. Even though we have access to all these methods and knowledge, it's so, I mean, change does not happen overnight, right? Even in the US, I started teaching 20 plus years ago, and similar issues are still there in the schools, in K-12 schools, and it's frustrating. Why can't we, change? Why can't we adopt the new approaches? Why can't we have better schools, better opportunities for our students? But it seems to be getting worse and worse every day, because as humans, we need to be first, be open to that change, have that growth mindset that everybody can learn, right? We could learn, and it's okay to make mistakes, and we need to learn from our mistakes and then move on. But then we even have challenges with that. So I guess this has to do with maybe starting with teacher education programs, Dr. Rahman, maybe in our teacher education program, integrating this into the curricula would be critical. And then starting at the school level, perhaps having discussions with our administrators, maybe in your professional development that you do, or your collaborations with the schools, you could bring this up as a way to integrate, as critical to integrate. And with your parents, right? In your meetings with parents, really instilling the importance of that social emotional aspect of learning is critical. So this requires buy-in from all stakeholders, not only the teacher, but also the students, right? Really making that connection with the student and allowing them to relate to what you're saying and empowering them. And that requires critical thinking, right? So encouraging students to think critically would also be one important component of having buy-in from all parties involved. So I hope that addresses, but it's
Thank you.
difficult.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think there is someone who wants to ask a question. Rabiul Islam, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I'm actually teaching secondary level English, so I hope my question is appropriate for this session. I've been teaching for the last 1 year online, so I've been noticing that the comprehension level of the students is getting worse day by day. One of the reasons that I thought maybe it's because they have too many classes at a stretch. They have English classes at 9, they have math class at 9:50, and then so on. So do you think like should we teach giving enough space in the routine, or do you think that actually spaces in the routine doesn't actually impact the learning style of the students? I'm talking about the secondary level children.
So adolescents have a lot of baggage, right? Emotional baggage that they're already going through. I mean, I have an adolescent. I have two in my house. I have, so my daughter started university this year, so she just graduated from high school. So they go through their own emotions and their own like relationships, uh, or or within their own communities. The motivation is really low, as you said. I see they don't want to do work, right? They want to do is sleep and be on their phones and watch TV and just, so I think it's normal that the kids are going through this because they don't have an opportunity to socialize with their peers, and this makes learning difficult. So similarly, perhaps acknowledging that uh, on the part of the teacher, you as a teacher, perhaps we need to acknowledge that this is okay, right? All these depressive moments that the kids are going through uh, is okay. You understand that, really relaying to them the message that you understand what they're going through, and then perhaps offering support, right? How can I support you in this process? Perhaps integrating lots of SEL into your teaching, perhaps integrating novels that actually speaks to the students' needs, and having them, allowing them to think critically about these issues might be a good start in your own, teaching.
Yeah, to add to that, I think Mr. Rabiul, increasing the time may not be always a solution, because it's very difficult to concentrate in an online class for too long. Actually, in any way, in any class, you cannot be attentive for a longer period of time. So yeah, probably other ways of making the classes interesting, and delivering your content in different ways, in multiple ways, multiple modalities. Giving breaks in between classes probably would be helpful, instead of extending the time. Breaks between classes probably is going to be helpful. Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, we all have Zoom fatigue, right? Sitting in meetings all
Yeah.
teaching. So, I mean, we as adults can't cope with it. We can't stay focused. I find
Yeah.
myself after long meetings, I find myself doing other things at the same time and not paying attention to the meeting. So we have a short attention,
Yeah.
especially on a virtual environment. So we need to keep that in mind rather than
Yeah.
extending, perhaps spending quality
Yeah.
instructional time, and then allowing them to do asynchronous activities or engaging
Yes.
in addition to the
That's one thing I believe in Bangladesh. We are not focusing much on asynchronous activities. We focus more on, like, the class, the lecture. So we all are giving lectures, the way we would do in a face-to-face setting. And then we are not giving a lot of activities, like, or allowing them to do things asynchronously. Of course, we have assignments and tasks like that. Yeah. Um,
yeah, maybe ask them to
so,
record videos, TikTok, right? Everybody's into TikTok, adolescents. So have them do, maybe have assignments related to their daily activities or things that they're interested in on
mhm.
a daily basis. that would really, catch their attention, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think there is a comment by Sheikh Nahian. If you'd like to make that comment yourself, instead of me reading it from the chat.
Talking off topic, life, whether it's such as.
Nahian, would you like to add? Would you like to make that point yourself, Nahian? I don't know whether he's there or not. Yeah, so he made a comment, I believe. So I think talking off topic, e.g. aspects related to life, weather, and such can refresh their minds and help them regain attention again. Yes.
Yeah.
So his mic is not working properly. So okay, so
Perhaps reverse this. Could we ask them to talk about their life for a bit instead of monologuing all the time? It gets so
yes.
tiring.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so Sumaya, can you please continue? I'll add to it. Like, sorry about the interruption. My mic was
No,
not working.
it's fine. So as I was saying that, to be able to have them speak on these sort of low impact topics that have no consequences in the class, you're not getting marked on this. I'm not going to scold you about it. So it might be a good way to have them just open up.
Mm-hmm. True. Right.
Go on, Nahian.
Yes. So, like as Tanzia Miss said, that as long as it's not personal, of course. But I mean, I'm seeing in my own house, like my little sister she's in grade 7, so she is having to sit in the class from 9 a.m. in the morning till 1 or 1:15 p.m. and like Mr. Robil was saying that they are doing the classes at a stretch. They might have, say, 5 to 10 minutes break in between each of the classes. And I tried listening to some of the lectures that that the teachers have been giving, and I realized that the whole time the whatever they talked about has been related to the lesson of the day. And I could see it in my sister's eyes and other students who had their cameras turned on. I could see it in their eyes that they have sort of lost the interest to continue, and they're just sitting there because they have to. So one teacher I saw actually did this. So while he was teaching, after say 15 to 20 minutes, he ended up talking about the weather, or how is it there, how's the environment there in the student's house, or around the area, how people are doing, like something like this. So this made the other students join in, and yes, we can say that 3 to 4 minutes were wasted because of going off topic, but then again all of them came back uh, uh, to the lesson of the day with a refreshed mind. So this is something that I think can work in all the different contexts.
I started to give them water alert. Like they have to get up and drink water and come back, or something like that. Put your hands up, or something funny that they can do, like where because they're actually sitting for a long time in the classroom. So that might be something they would like to do. So they really enjoyed. So yeah, I started doing that recently. Yeah, that helps a little
Stretching
bit.
right at the beginning. Stretching.
Yeah, stretching, getting like maybe food, maybe snacks, or having water, something like that. Yeah, so they started enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely. Great. And don't see that as a waste of time. It's a way for you to connect with your students, right? That's not a waste of time.
Yeah, it just like takes like a minute or two, and they have their water, they come back. So something like that they get to enjoy. Yeah.
So there is another comment by our teacher, one of my colleagues, Mustabin. Would you like to make that point to yourself, or make that right, read that comment?
Yes, thank you, Farzan Apu. Okay, hi, thank you so much for organizing this a very helpful session. So I'd like to sort of add something and about like the South Asian mindset of students and teachers. I would say that it is a sort of ingrained idea that asking a question in class is disrespectful, or say you can't interrupt the teacher, you can't talk over the teacher. And I found a big change when I went for my studies abroad, and over there the teacher student relationship is a lot easier, since they remove a lot of honorifics from the names. So I become Mustabin instead of, say, Mustabin ma'am or Mustabin miss. So there's that. Even though that's not possible in a South Asian classroom, it's like something cultural that our honorifics need to be there. I like it. I quite enjoy it. They prefer it. But I'm really trying as an educator to encourage them to ask questions. So it's sort of a challenge to get them to speak sometimes. So, what tips do you have, um, Dr. Haas?
I mean, those traditional approaches are, I think, valid. But also, I mean, even in the US, you would call them Mr. and Mrs. Kids wouldn't call the teacher with their names. So I think keeping that respect is critical everywhere. So maybe don't get rid of that. They shouldn't be calling you with, by your name. They should still call you Mr. or Mrs. or Doctor or whatever, right? That keeps the distance or the level of respect that's required, maybe perhaps between the student and the teacher, or the boundary that's required. But then also, uh, maybe moving away from, that it's okay to ask questions and establishing those like at the beginning of your classroom, right? And this usually happens maybe at the beginning of the semester, or at the beginning of the year, that you tell students that what are the classroom norms and rules, right? What are the rules of the classroom? Perhaps asking them to chime in creating those norms, classroom norms. So what's disrespectful to you may not be disrespectful to the instructor or the student, or vice versa. So there could be cultural differences. In a Southeast Asian setting, perhaps everybody has similar norms and they're used to the similar norms. Maybe breaking those norms a little bit and establishing that comfortable classroom environment and having a closer knit relationship with your students would be critical, right? But then that all needs to happen, at the beginning or perhaps throughout the year, that you need to establish that with your students, that you're open for them to be asking questions. You're open to having interactive sessions, not really lecturing, and perhaps giving them the opportunity to also take on leading roles, like leading discussions in the classroom, right? Taking those roles, or acting as a facilitator, perhaps really relaying to them that you are there to facilitate, to not lecture, right? You're the facilitator in the classroom, and they should take ownership of their own learning. They should take part in their own learning. So I guess really establishing those and relaying the information to your students that you are there as a facilitator, not as a dictator, it would be critical.
Do we have any more questions or comment? If not, then we will conclude the session. But before concluding this session, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to a few people. First of all, of course, thank you, Dr. Rabia Hos, for your presentation. I'm sure we all have benefited from this presentation. I benefited. It's a good reminder for myself, that there are things I still need to do, and we all need to do. And I would also like to thank my fellow committee members, Tanzia Siddiqa, Senior Lecturer Sheikh Nahian, Lecturer Sumaya Kabir, Lecturer from the Department of English and Humanities. And my sincere thanks thanks goes to our IT who extend wonderful support always. Thank you Arif Bhai and Shamsher Bhai and Kaisar Bhai. And I would also like to thank Amimul Ihsan for making the beautiful post webinar, and to Ishrakul Islam for his support. So thank you all, and thank you very much, Rabia,
Thank you so much.
for being with us.
Yeah, pleasure being here. I hope that we can, collaborate in the future too. I look forward to staying in touch. Nice to see you again, Farzana.
Nice to have you with us, and probably in future we will have you, face to face.
Yes, I would love to come down to Bangladesh. Yes.
Yes, as I said, you have an open invitation. So anytime we're able to travel, and hopefully, looking forward to that.
Yes, me too.
So yeah, so take care and stay safe, and thank you very much. It was very enlightening.
Have a good evening.
You
The
too.
day is just
You have
starting.
a good day.
The bus. You might be late to bus. Okay, I gotta go.
Okay, have a good day. Bye bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Farzana, and committee and IT, Sabaike, and everybody who else is here. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending this session.
Everyone.